Okay, good morning. We are in Beis, volume 2, page 1186. Okay, to sum up, what have we learned? We learned like this. In the broad sense of the word, we're discussing how v'yadaita Ayin v'shavesel levavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim b'shamayim mimal v'la'oretz mitachas. How we are obligated to know and to feel the divine both ways, as he explained, seeing the divine within existence and seeing the divine beyond existence. No, it's Hashem within Elokim, Hashem within Adnai, and Adnai within Hashem, Havaya, and basically uniting the divine with existence on both terms, Das Tachta and Das Elyon. And then he continues to explain what it means then in the heavens above and the earth below. So briefly, it comes to negate duality. They bring the divine both in the spiritual and into the material as well through mitzvos in this material world. In contrast to the opinions that go purely based on rational and seichel, you could argue that you could experience the divine much more in heaven, in the spiritual realms, than in the physical realm. And the answer is no, b'shamayim v'aretz mitachas. Then he brought the Zohar Parshas Boy, the bottom of page 1182 I'm reading from. I'm sorry, Boy, Parsha Vayigash, sorry. Where he talks about Rabbi Yitzchak's opinion, Rabbi Yitzchak's statement that God created the world, he created the lower world, comparable to the higher world. And in God's glory and honor is both above and below, and explains that's the unity between the higher and the lower. And Rabbi Yehuda comes to explain it deeper and further, because you have to understand how that's achieved. How do you achieve that the higher should come down to low when they are fundamentally different, exist different levels, even on the level of immanent energy, pnimi, as he explained, levush, that you cut it from the word levush, from the term levush. And the answer is, in the words of Rabbi Yehuda, ubara Adam al kula. He created Adam al kula, above them all. And what's the Adam? Briefly, the Adam is the central character or the central entity in all Seder Shtalshlus, with the role of introducing Pnimius, the inner dimension, the inner purpose, which connects everything. Because Adam is Gematria Ma Milagav, the Pnimius within, Ma is within all of the spheres, all of existence, and is the Adam with Ma, Bittel, that creates the Iskalus, the interconnectivity and connection, what he calls Iskashrus, Ischabrus, and the Hamshacha, and drawing down from the higher levels to the lower levels to the point that you don't just get the reflection of the Kav, but you get the Etzem of the Kav, which Atzilus on its own also doesn't have. So the Adam introduces something that wasn't there before, a deeper dimension of the divine from the inner dimension to the point that it transforms even the lowest, even the Kalim of Biyah, not just the Neshama, the Eir of Biyah, all the way down below, Mitzvos Maisius, that through the mitzvahs that a person does on earth, physical mitzvahs, the Adam HaTachten, that generates this energy in all the levels, connecting them all from the highest to the lowest. And that's the words of Rabbi Yehuda, that Badam Bara al Kula, meaning that the Adam is above them all. That's why he has the power to draw down the Ein Sof that the Rabbi Yitzchak hinted to, the Ein Sof which equalizes everything. Everything comes from a level that's beyond Atzilus and Biyah, like he said on page 1183. He said, It's because Keiche Ein Sof, that's higher than the higher and lower worlds. That's what equalizes them. But who actually stimulates that and who draws it down? That's the Adam through his Avodah and his Ma'aseh Mitzvos. That's briefly a summary of this Maimah that we've learned, which of course is central to the whole theme of Ayin Beis that we've learned before about Das Ayin, Das Tachten, and prior to that, the whole V'yadaita Hayim. Hayim is day and night, Shabbos and the weekdays. Birur, which means refining the world. Das Tachten, Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra, and then higher the Shabbos and higher Man that reveals the divine that's higher than existence. Going all the way back to what we discussed, that even post-Tzimtzum, even after, in other words, post-Tzimtzum or post-Parsa, after the partition that we've been discussing, after the partition between Atzilus and Biyah, we can connect L'Tata and L'Elo, Shamayim Mimal and La'aretz Mitachas, all part of one larger unity. But the key thing is it doesn't happen on its own. On its own, there is a distinction in Shtalshus. There's higher and lower levels. It's the Adam that's created above them all that has the ability to connect them all the way down to the mitzvahs that we do on earth. Like we've been explaining the examples, whether it's the wool of tzitzis. So we take wool of tzitzis and it's connected and evolves from the wool, the pure wool, the hair on the head of higher levels of atik and so on. The same thing is when we do tefillin, we're mamshech moichin. They spoke about two levels of moichin. We spoke about the moichin, the katnus, moichin, the gadlus, moichin, the katnus of tzitzis, moichin, the gadlus of tefillin. And then the last thing we learned was about netilis yadayim, that when we wash our hands below and we eliminate the toxins on our hands, the hands refer to the midas alyenus. We in turn generate from above, also on above, that there's the hamshach of chachma, maya, the mayim of chachma, to purify the zah, as we learned, that goes all the way to zah, which eliminates yinikas achitzenim, the type of the gleaning, and the grasp that the negative energy may have. And that's where we stopped, the middle of 2/3 down, page 1186. So that sums up what we've learned so far. And obviously goes all the way back to the Magid's Torah, that after the Parsa, you can experience that which is before the Parsa. Okay. The two ways of connecting Reimamus Keser, which means the divine beyond existence, transcendence with immanence. With Elokai Melech, the divine within existence. Okay, so that ties it all up. I want to point out one thing that I didn't really finish completely. Now I did look it up. If you may recall, on the top of page 1185, we spoke about Ubamokamacha Mavur, the Gamat Sinetis Pratim. There we were speaking that the Pnimius of Zah is Adam, and he says that's Mad, the Iu Eidach Atzilus, the Iu Shakid Ilona. Is the path of Atzilus, the pathway in Atzilus, and it's Shakid Delana, the irrigation and the watering of the tree of Zah. So he said this is the level of Atzmus HaKav, because he explained that the Kav is like a Tziner HaGadol, is like a channel that comes from the river. The river would be the expansive Ein Sof in the Mashal. The Tziner HaGadol is a wide artery or a wide channel that channels that energy into existence, and from there it breaks off and branches off into Tzenedes Ketanim of the Kalim. So essentially it would look like this. The Kav is like, the river would be like the Ein Sof. The Kav is a wide artery. It branches off, each one to the different Kalim throughout Ishtalshus. Kalim of Chachma, Kalim Bina, Kalim of Das, Chesed, Gvura, Teferes. So according to this, Shema, the Iyu, Shakya, what is Shema? That's within all these spheres, is the Kav, the Atzmus HaKav. That's the main artery. Then he says, B'mokam Achem Avur, elsewhere it explains that also the narrow paths, the narrow arteries, the narrow channels, they are not the Eiris that go into the Kalim. There's Sheirish Eiris HaMislapshim B'Kalim. So he adds a third level now. So you'd have the kav is the wide artery. It branches off to the root of the oidus, and from there would go the oidus into each keli. So he says, what's the mokamacher? I looked and looked everywhere I could look. I'm convinced that he's referring to Ayin Beis earlier. And I mentioned to you, it's Perek Reish Chav Tes, chapter 229, page 465 in volume 1. Because he explicitly talks about this. And he says that there's two ways to understand it. You can understand it either as the oidus in the kelim, or the oidus that are higher than the kelim. He actually brings 3 levels. He says there are 3 levels. There's the oidus that are the kav. There's the oidus that are higher than, they're outside of the kav, but they're not yet in the kelim. And there's the energy in the containers. I was concerned with what he says in the parentheses. So my question was that when we learned it, what is this parentheses coming to add? He already said it's Pnimius HaKav. He said Atzmus HaKav. So what's he saying here? And what's the Alkein? In other words, according to the Mokamacher, he has to be referring to the Mokamacher because he already said it's Atzmus HaKav before. So if you just say it's synonymous, he's just repeating it again. So I was thinking that he's referring to that according to the elsewhere, which is in chapter 229. That the narrow channels are the root of the energies, not the actual energies that go into the containers. So in other words, there's the wide channel, narrow channels, and even further, the energy goes into the containers is the 3rd level. So then, what's Shema? What he says, Milagav, Iyu Shema, Diyu Derech Havaya. He says that which irrigates the tree. He says that would be Pnimius HaKav. So the first question is does he mean by Pnimius HaKav, Atzmus HaKav that he said before? Or is he deliberately changing it? Now that I read it and I look back there, I don't see why Pnimius HaKav would be different than Atzmus HaKav in this context. First, I thought clearly it must be a lower level. Unless you say Pnimius HaKav is higher than Atzmus HaKav, which I don't think is pshat, because Atzmus usually is a higher level than Pnimius. So either he means it's synonymous. No, it's according to the second approach, that the narrow channels are higher than the oidus in the kelim. They're the root of the oidus in the kelim. They're the root of these energies in the containers. That according to that, what would the kav be? Pnimius HaKav. The kav would be, what would Shema be? The Pnimius HaKav. The Chetzenius HaKav would be the one that is the narrower channel, the narrower channels, and then it goes from there into the kelim. That would be most likely the way he interprets it. But I don't know if that's different than Atzmus HaKav. It may be, it may not be. So I'm not positive. Now that I'm saying it, I'm thinking that maybe Atzmus HaKav is even higher. Is like Tiferes, Hanelam, Atzmus, the core. Anyway, I just wanted to spell this out a bit more because I didn't spell it out because I didn't really read it. Now I finished reading chapter 229. So I just wanted to add that. Okay. So it's either synonymous or it means a different level or it may even mean higher, not positive. Okay. I'm going to continue now on page 1186 unless somebody has a question. Okay. So on page 1186, we're by the line, where are we? We are Elyenes b'midas. What? Excuse me?
The first sentence is V'zeu Gamken, I think, where you haven't read.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
so
okay.
the line begins b'midas Elyenes. Elyenes would be the line that begins 1186. And if you want to follow the text, go to ayinbeis.com. There, the text is all there, scanned PDFs. You can download or read from there. So just the flow. What's the flow? He's been talking about how a human being below doing mitzvahs generates and connects and draws down the energy from the highest levels and in the highest levels. So we've learned that the last thing he spoke about after tzitzis and tefillin, he moved to natilas yadayim, that when a person washes their hands, I'll just read quickly. Through washing your hands below, nimshach b'chinas hachachma b'hamidus elyenis. You draw down chachma, which is the water, the level, the purifier that is above the concept of contamination or pollution of the toxins. Like he said, so you're drawing that down into the midas elyenis. So the mitzvah below is impacting in Atzilus, that chachma is being drawn into the midas. But this is done only through a human being below. It's not done the other way around. You don't do that above, you do it below. So it's the mitzvah below, the Adam Lamata, that's created, that's drawing down from the Adam in the Adam Lamaila above in these levels that we just spoke. Just like we spoke about the wool of the tzitzis and the tchelis and the blue thread and tefillin. Now he's talking about Natilis Yadayim. So now he's going to say, now this that we're discussing now, that through mitzvahs below, in Latata, in other words, in Oretz Metachas, you connect it with Shemayim Memal, and they all become one, because we have that power. And remember the two levels of mitzvahs, which he's going to refer to shortly again. The general drawing down of Ratzon Elyon, God's desire. And now we're talking about the specifics, not just in general drawing down Ratzon Elyon, which is a very high level. Keser, Tarach, Amud Eir, the 620 pillars of light, as we discussed on top, which according to logic, it would seem like he said, Neged HaSeichel. It's against the logic, it's not rational to say that you could draw down the divine down in this world. Nevertheless, through mitzvahs, the gift that God gave us, mitzvahs, we can draw down the Ratzon Elyon. But second thing, we also draw down in specifics, in the details. Like we spoke, the Tzemer is the level of Saresh Karmenaki and the level of Meichin. And now we're talking about Natilis Yadayim, bringing Chachma into Zah, into Midas. All this is also specifics. The mitzvah specifically also draw down in the highest levels and all being generated from below. So now he's going to explain this further, that this is what we say. We say this every morning. V'zeu inyan gam ken inyan. This is also the inyan of Yichud Kudsha Brich Shchintei. And we say l'shem Yichud Kudsha Brich Shchintei. Some people say that before many blessings. We say it once, right before Baruch Sha'amar, and Chassidus explains the Samach to Samach Nun Zayin that extends through the whole day. So we're saying a statement. What is it? Yichud Kudsha Brich Shchintei. The joining of the level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Shechina. These are two names for God. But as we'll soon see, these are two levels of the divine revelation. Shaydeh mitzvahs. Through mitzvahs. Mamshichim ha'er v'agili b'zoh. Through mitzvahs we draw the energy and the revelation into Zoh, into the Midas, u'mezah lemalchus. And from Zoh into Malchus. So we're drawing from Moichin into Zoh, and Zoh into Malchus. Sheyagilu gam kein lamata. That this revelation should also come below. Remember, we're discussing here joining the higher levels and the lower levels. Without Avodah, without mitzvahs, Atzilus and Biyah are not the same level. But through mitzvahs, we're drawing through all the levels, all the way down below. It says in Zohar, Zohar, as I pointed out a number of times, has different sections in it. Just like the Gemara has a Mishnah, a Braisa, a Gemara, and so on. So in Zohar, you also have sections. You have Raya Mehemnev, you have a Medrash Hanelam, you have a good 10 different sections in Zohar. You have, So there's a section called Medrash Hanelam, which means the concealed Medrash, in Chayesar. In Zohar Chayesar, he gives us the page 129. So what does he say there in the Zohar, in Chayesar? He talks about B'inyan HaTfilin, regarding Tfilin. So he's going to compare Tfilin, Shezeu Masher Kosav, V'osel L'migdash V'shchintei B'seicham. Build for me a sanctuary, a temple, and I will rest and reside and dwell among you. So this is what the Zohar says. The Kisha'adam maniach tefillin, When a person wears, puts on tefillin, haksuvim kidain, that are written according to halach, in other words, that are written properly, that there's, in other words, kosher tefillin, what happens? Nasa reticha lakadosh baruch hu, b'china zah lahamshich b'meichin delay, b'chinas meichin an memshachim ha'idei tefillin. Reticha. What does reticha mean in this context? Anyone? Reticha. I think it means, I just don't want to guess. Just a second, let me look it up.
Reticho means when you are connecting like two pieces of iron with a fire, that you have this
Like
spark,
smelting.
scalding. I think so.
I think that's reticha, you think?
I think
Okay,
so.
possible. I'm just looking it up. Let me see if I can find something. Not sure. I'm not sure what it means. Here it looks like it means Nesiya. Not positive. Okay. Looks like means Nesiya.
חברי אומרים מסניסו בתיימו דתפילין למהווה ההוא גברו דומיו דרסיכין אילוין לסיכו תתור.
In modern Hebrew, it means welded or welding.
That's what he just said. That's what Rabbi Teichtel just said. Okay. I will look it up more. It could be welding. It's about the Shchintei b'seicham. So it sounds like, okay, okay, it could be welding, it could be connecting, it could be channeling even. I think there's another word. I'll look it up. But bottom line is the content is understood. That tefillin does what? It creates a channel. Like Kadosh Baruch Hu, that b'china zah. Kadosh Baruch Hu remembers zah. Shchina is malchus. I should have mentioned that before. So he's making a reticha like Kadosh Baruch Hu. It could even be binding. The word binding. Lahamshich b'meichin delay. B'chinas meichin han meshachin ha'idei tefillin. To draw down into the meichin of zah. The meichin, the meichin that are nimshach through tefillin. Okay, so here's what he says. This is what it means. Let me explain. That in other words, when you put on tefillin, something happens above that's not there on its own. We know there's zah. That's Kadosh Baruch Hu. We know that meichin of zah. That again is natural, but the tefillin bring a higher level of meichin into the meichin of zah. That's what tefillin does. So he's going to say in the parentheses, if you ever learned tefillin the Mora Alma Tov Reish Nun Gimel, it's a Maimon that Rebbe Rashab said at the Bar Mitzvah of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and other places he brings two interpretations when we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu Maniach Tefillin. What does that mean? That when you put on tefillin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu maniach tefillin. So he says in the parentheses, "V'zeu kepirush." This interpretation from Zohar is
in a dictionary from Hebrew Aramaic, lesicho welded.
Okay, that's what he just said. V'zeu kepirish HaKadosh Baruch Hu maniach film, da HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chinas zah, maniach film b'chinas ha-moichin she'en moichin atzmin kenal. So there's two interpretations there. One interpretation, which is the one he's going with here, what means HaKadosh Baruch Hu maniach film? What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu before he puts on film? So he says HaKadosh Baruch Hu before he puts on tefillin is zah and moichin of zah on their own. When Ayin puts on tefillin, he causes the Eibishter to put on tefillin. What means HaKadosh Baruch zah? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is getting hamshacha from tefillin, from moichin atzmim that are higher than zah. That's what he's saying here. Hamshach b'meichin delay b'chinas meichin hamshacha ma'adei tefillin. Okay. So that's an explanation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So through the mitzvahs, let's just go back again. He said through mitzvahs, it becomes mamshichim eda gili b'zah. So this is the gili that mamshich in zah. Similar to what he brought before about natilis yadayim. You mamshich the moichin, mayim, into zah, into the yadayim, into the midas. That's why he's bringing all of these, because this all shows how we're drawing, how through mitzvahs you're drawing from one level to the next level. So now we explain Kudsha Brich. What about Shchintei? Okay, the Zohar says, "V'osili migdash v'shachanti b'seicham." So he says, "V'shchintei hu mashesheichen v'nimshach itanu." The Zohar continues that Shchintei, when you say "V'osili migdash v'shachanti b'seicham," is that sheichen that it rests and dwells and resides and is drawn itanu. That's drawn within us or together with us. So how does it all come together? So he says, when you're uniting Zah and Malchus, because Kudsha is you're drawing down something which is removed, holy and removed. That something that was on its own removed should now be drawn in a state that it resides and dwells and manifests, enclosed within the worlds in a way that the gili should come down below. So there's a lot of things happening here. Let me just unpack it. Let's just break it down. We're talking about, first of all, the connection from the higher levels to the lower levels. The second thing we're discussing, that all this is generated through a mitzvahs below. So he's bringing the Zohar. He's saying that Yichud Kudsha Brich Shchintei, which is, of course, the Yichud we're looking for, Havaya Elokim, like Havaya Elokim and Adnai, Havaya and Adnai. So he says that through the mitzvahs that we do, we draw down from into Zah, which is Kudsha Brichu, from there into Shchintei. So you have now the higher levels are being drawn to the lower levels, even the levels that are removed. And more than that, we're also drawing into Zah, into Kudsha Brichu. So everything is being connected here, all generated by the mitzvahs below. Okay. So the Zohar just confirms this subject matter. Okay, good. Remember, we learned that Atzilus on its own is only a reflection. Remember, on page 1184, he said that Atzilus on its own is only a reflection. And he said the following. Oros HaKav. Rabbi Yehuda was concerned that it shouldn't just be a reflection, it should be the Etzem. He says clearly here. V'akavoni hi liyas gili erakav mamish bebiyash da'amitis ha'gili v'adrab ha'idei gili yetesu ser ba'atzilus liyas gam sham gili atzmus ha'kav. If you look in the middle of the page, 1184. So he's hinting to that right now, or more than hinting. Not just ha'ora, the Adam, so Atzilus on its own, it's a reflection of the Kav. Malchus is a reflection of the reflection. And Rabbi Yehuda, who's coming to bring a deeper dimension into the whole thing, he's saying he doesn't want just a ha'ara. He should have also the Etzem of the Kav. Amitis Agili. Yeah, Amitis Agili. So now he's explained how that happens. So Atzilus on its own, everything is divine. No one denying that. So what do we add? What does the Adam add? The mitzvahs we do draw down in Atzilus additional energy, but not just additional, but from the Etzem of the Kav, from Eiyu Ma, Milagav. Remember, Adam is Ma, Milagav from within. The Etzem of the Kav, we draw that into Atzilus, into Kudsha, Brich, and Zah. We draw it from Zah into Malchus, into Shchintei. It should be Shechenes into Biyah, all the way into the lowest levels. So we have, through the mitzvahs below, we're drawing down Yichud, Kudsha, Brich, and Shchintei from levels all the way from Etzem, all the way down below. That's essentially what he's saying in simple English. That's why he says Moichin Atzmim. Because he wants Etzem. He doesn't want a reflection of Moichin and Zah. He wants the Etzem. Okay. Maybe this is why he also uses three examples. Because tefillin, he said, was moichin the gadlus bina. Tzitzis is moichin the zah. The tilis yadayim is from moichin, from chachma into malch, into yadayim, into mizah.
He said Hamshachas HaChochma. What's the difference between Hamshachas HaMeichin and Hamshachas HaChochma?
Chachma is in moichin itself. It's the highest level. But what it sounds like he's saying, because he says that tefillin is bina. So the moichin of tefillin is drawn into the moichin of zah. That's a Kosh Baruch Hu maniach tefillin. That's what he said earlier as well. Teis was said b'meichin. Look at the parentheses high up around the bottom. It could do be in a good maniach tefillin. Okay, got it. It's all about bringing higher levels into lower levels. So he says, Meichin of Bina tefillin into Meichin of Zah. Tzitzis is Meichin in Zah. And Netilas Yadayim is Chachma into Zah. He doesn't really explain the difference between them, but it sounds to me that Netilas Yadayim is the highest level because it's Chachma. Tefillin is Bina. And Tzitzis is Meichin of Zah. So 3 levels of Meichin. One Chachma, Bina, and Meichin of Zah. That's what it comes out when you read it all together. But regardless, all of them are drawing down from the higher levels to the lower levels. That's what mitzvahs below do. That's the main punchline here. Okay. Now he says v'nimtza. Now he goes back and sums up what we learned about mitzvahs here. V'nimtza. So we derive from this. We conclude, v'nimtza, from this we learn, we draw out, we derive, sheyesh b'mitzvahs beis inyanim. It's going back to the 2 things on top of the page. That in mitzvahs, there's 2 elements, 2 aspects, 2 facets. Echad, klolos ha-mitzvahs, the general mitzvahs, shehem b'chinas rotzna elyon, the general mitzvahs, no matter which mitzvahs, all the mitzvahs generally, that's rotzna elyon. Is the supernal desire, it's the desire, the divine desire. The kachur etzeni is baruch, so is the desire of God. Lies nasim ha-mitzvahs, ba'al yodam davki yegili b'chinas ha-rotzen. Like his last etzeni, the rotzna elyon, so is the rotzna elyon, that mitzvahs should be done, should be fulfilled. And through that, and through Bi'al Yodam Dafke, and Dafke through these mitzvahs, that's how God shows. You reveal God's desire in this world. So if you have wool is God's creation, but it's not God's desire in what he wants you to use the wool for. When you use it for tzitzis, and you wear tzitzis, you mamshir the rotzna elyon in general. That's all the mitzvahs, all mitzvahs are all under the rubric of divine desire. What's the second thing? Beis. And the second facet of the second aspect of mitzvahs is this. Beis, haprotius shel mitzvahs. The details of the mitzvahs. Shebechol echad yamshach haprotius. The details that each one transmits a particular energy. They're not equal. The Ratzon Elyon is an equal that they're all fulfilling God's will, whether you're keeping Shabbos or tzitzis or tefillin or netilas yadayim, Ratzon Elyon. Now we're talking in the second aspect is the specific hamshacha. Tefillin hein hamshachas hamechin bezun. Tefillin is going summing up what he said, is being mamshech moichin in Zah and Malchus, like we learned. Kadosh Baruch Hu maniach tefillin is Zah, getting from tefillin the hamshacha of moichin atzmim, and it goes into Malchus, from Zah into Malchus, like he said in the Zohar. Okay? V'tzitzis gam kein hamshachas hamechen v'ubchinus madrega acheres. Tzitzis is also drawing down mechen, but it's a different level. He said before it's mechen of Zah. Doesn't specify here what it is. He just says different level. He said Zah, and it's also
lower, right?
He also said that it's sareshik omer naki. So he said liz b'chinas chachmei law. Sareshik omer naki liz b'chinas chachmei law. Then afterwards he said tzitzis is meichin of Zah, meichin de katnus, and he said specifically meichin de Zah. Krishmi said was meichin of b'chinas chachma. Okay. So Krishmi compared to Netilas Yadayim. Okay. The reason he's not going into detail because it's not what he wants to really explain here. I mentioned the last time that he's using these only as examples. You're going to have to learn other Maimorim if you really want to understand what is tzitzis and what is tefillin. He's only coming to use it to explain that it's different hamshachas. So he's hinting to, and more than hinting, he's saying briefly that this is, he used three things by tzitzis. One is the hamshacha sadesha kamenak aliyas b'chinas chachmei law. First he used chachmei law. Then he said, in distinguishing from tefillin, he called it meichin de katnus and b'chlolus meichin de zah. He said that specifically. And then, and that's it. That's what he said. Now he just says generally, b'china acheres, also meichin, but behu b'chinas madrega acheres, in a different level of meichin. And the third thing he brought, v'netilas yadayim, hu hamshachas ha'chochma. That's the hamshacha of chochma. As I pointed out, that's what he said before, chochma into zah, whereas by tefillin it's bina he mentioned. Bina into zah. Again, he doesn't break it down in detail. That we're going to have to do another Maimorim. Fine. That's Netilas Yadayim. And it's the hamshacha of chachma, v'hu tikun b'chinas ramach evarim de zah. And that repairs, now we're introducing the 248 limbs of zah. Is he talking about Netilas Yadayim? We're talking about mitzvahs in general. I'm not positive. I think he means mitzvahs. Because I'm sorry, Netilas Yadayim, because he says, remember, it was the hamshacha of moichin, of chochma into the Yadayim to purify them, which is zah. Let me just see what he said before. Chochma midas al yenis. Or you could say he's talking about in general mitzvahs. I think he means both probably, but I'm not positive. The next line sounds like he's talking in general mitzvahs. Ukamaimer vasisa meisam. Vasisa meisam. You shall perform these mitzvahs. Vasisa meisam. So he says, the Maimer Chazal say on this, Maila ani hagalechem ki'ilu asuni. So it's a very interesting statement here to drive the point home that we are actually, so to speak, increasing in the divine itself. So he says, what means vasisa meisam? Vasisa Meisim Bepashtus, it means that you shall perform the mitzvahs. So the Chazal say no. Vasisam also goes that you are creating me. That when you Mailani Alechem, Kilo Asuni, that when you do mitzvahs, it's as if you make me, you create me, which is, of course, a very powerful statement. Obviously, it doesn't mean create God, God forbid. It means you create the dimension of godliness that manifests in Zoh, in the structure of Adam. B'chinas tasteless eres, b'esses spheres the Atzilus. So Atzilus is there, but the Adam, through doing mitzvahs, is as if he's creating, because he's drawing in a new level of energy into Atzilus, b'chinas atzmus ein sof. From atzmus ein sof, that Atzilus on its own doesn't have. B'chinas atzmus hakav, the core of the kav, like we learned earlier, lies tasteless eres, b'esses spheres, that there should be an abundance of energy in the 10 spheres. Never forget that. And that it should also draw that energy into biyah. So basically, to put it very simply, I'll use two examples. One example, you build a house. God built his house. He built Seder Shtalshlus. Seder Shtalshlus is a complex structure. Goes all the way from, let's start with the Tzimtzum, the Kav, Ak, Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim, Atzilus, Brich, Yitzir, Asiya, spheres, 10 spheres, parsois, partitions, everything we know about Seder Shtalshlus. God created, put it in place. Let's use the example of a building. An architect builds a very elaborate, complex structure, building. Okay, now it's just sitting there. What's the purpose of this building? So we know the purpose is to put a human being into this building, and the human being should start using the building properly, not just live there for shelter and protection, but to use the house and turn it into what? A dira b'tachtenim. To make it into a mishkan. What would the migdash be if there was no Avedas HaMikdash? Let's say B'Tzalel, according to Moshe's instructions in these week's Parshas, he built a beautiful mishkan. Everything exactly as ordered. From the On and the Meneda and the Shulchan and the Mizbeach HaKteris, and then all the around the Yediyas, the Kroshim, the Adonim, the Brichim. You have a whole beautiful structure. But until Parsha Pekudei, when there's the Hakomis HaMishkan, the Shchedesh Nissen for the first time, it's a beautiful structure. Now what? What happens if they stop right there? It's missing the whole point. There's no Pnimius. There's no Odom, there's no Ma, Milagav, there's no Iskalas, there's no Isachdus. You have a building, and you have all the Kalim. Now you need the punchline, the bottom line. Just like by creation, 6 days of creation before the Adam was a beautiful world. God created a perfect world. Everything was there. But without the human, you don't have the purpose, like having a house and no one lives there. The human being comes. His job is to draw not just the elokus that was necessary to build the structure. That God did. Now he wants the human being to use it for the real purpose, which is to draw pnimius and atzmus ein sof from atzmus hakav into the structure and elevate it and turn it into a living divine entity that's working with Avedas HaMikdash in the Mishkan or in the world Adam and Chavel of the L'Shamra. Ramach Mitzvos Shasam Mitzvos Leisesa. So if you don't have the Adam, what do you have? Breishis, B'Shul Yisrael, B'Shul HaTeira. Take away Yisrael and Teira, you have a world, but you don't have the purpose being fulfilled. So what does the Adam do? That's why it says, Ma'ila Lova Kosav Kila Asuni. Because without you, my being in this world is as if it's just there, but it's concealed, and you don't really see the divine alive. Only you see that only when the human being comes into the picture and elevates and uses the world for the purpose for which it was created, which is everything we're learning. I'm simply putting it in very balabatish eisius. To use the example of the art that I often use, God created the art. You can look at the art and that's it. The goal is not to stare at the art and say, look how beautiful it is. The goal is to use the art to fulfill the purpose of the artist. So the art itself is chitzenius ha'er. That's the creation. The world, the universe I described, it's all the chitzenius of the world. And that's why there's a lot of details. It's beautiful, no one doubts that. But until you don't bring the Adam, the human being says, I know the purpose of this art. Why did God create this art? Because he wants us to refine and elevate it and turn it into a divine expression. Even though it's concealed, the yesh, to reveal the divine, to use this world, to make it into a divine expression. And there's two aspects to it. One is the Etzem Ratzon Elyon. God didn't just create the art. He wanted you to use the art to fulfill his will. Why did he create Semer? In order to do the tzitzis and be mamshech. But all of them have an equalized thing, the Ratzon Elyon. And then he wants not just the general Ratzon, my desire should be fulfilled in this world. I want it in details. The wool, the meichin, the tefillin, the tilis yadayim. Every detail of existence should be permeated with the divine will that it makes a specific hamshacha, and explains some of these hamshachas from meichin to zah to malchus, all the way down below. So therefore, when you do a mitzvah, both things are happening. You're drawing down the general energy of the Ratzon Elyon into this world, which is what God's kavanah is. And the second thing, you're drawing it down to specific details. Each aspect of existence is expressing a particular divine form of energy. But the Adam is adding something that was not there before. He's adding that, what he calls Teisvus Eris Ma'atzmus Ein Sof, Atzmus Akav, and that should be drawn into these 10 spheres, into the art, into the structure, and all the way down below into the lowest worlds, into this world as well. So that's what he's really saying. The thing is that Rebbe Rashab said it in more dense language, with a lot of Kabbalistic references and more esoteric. But really, the punchline of it all is what I just said right now. And that is what we accomplish, the Adam accomplishes, which explains Rabbi Yehuda's addition, V'Adam bara Adam al Kula, and explains ultimately, as we're going to conclude now, you'll see how what the human being, the Adam does in achieving this unity of the highest and the lowest, which is not there on its own. Again, the structure would be a structure, everything would be in place, but Atzilus and Biyah would not speak to each other necessarily. Biyah would be a much lower level. But here, you're bringing the Ratzon Elyon into all these levels, and specifically in this particular Hamshachas, as he described here in detail. So really, if you really unpack this in detail, you can go through every mitzvah in the Torah, and every mitzvah brings this Hamshachah. When you come Shabbos, what would Shabbos be without the Jew, without the human being? Mikacha v'kaim would be a holy day, but there's no one here to keep Shabbos. Zocher v'shamer, shmartem es ha-Shabbos. We come, so the seventh day which God made holy, we sanctify and we live up to that holiness. So we're mamshech halakus into Shabbos. And the same thing with Yom Tov, and the same thing with Pesach, the same thing with, we said, every detailed mitzvah. So every mitzvah a human being does below is accomplishing two general things. One is bringing Keser, the Ratzon Elyon of the highest transcendent levels, Etzem, into existence, but also the Etzem into Giluyim in the specifics of each mitzvah, in Meichin, in Midas, in Zah, in Malchus, and all the other details that different mitzvahs address from top to bottom. So whole Seder Shishtalshel, the whole structure. So we have, like the Sefer Charedim says, every mitzvah corresponds to another limb or organ. So you have mitzvahs that are tluyas b'peh, the mouth, mitzvahs that tluyas b'yadayim, mitzvahs that tluyas b'machshava, mitzvahs that tluyas b'aznayim. Every part, Ramach Evarim, correspond to the 248 positive mitzvahs. Each Aver has its Hamshacha. And the 365 Gidim, however you translate that, whether it's vessels, blood vessels, nerves, 365 channels correspond to the 365 negative mitzvahs. So when a human being lives up to all of it, he becomes a Merkava. He becomes essentially a channeler of the divine into all these levels, all the way down to the lowest levels. And the most important, the Yimam Shech Atzmi, not just Gilui, an Atzmi, not just a Ha'ara, a reflection, but the Etzem of it all. And that's only possible when you're coming from Pnimius, Because if you don't know the deeper kavanah of the art or of the structure, you're never going to draw that down. You'll just see the external. Most people live their lives on the surface level. They live in a world, they eat, they sleep, they drink, they do business. It's all chitzenius. It's only when you realize the primus kavanah. Why did God create all of this? The purpose of it all is when you begin to reveal the inner primus, which is the uniting factor that connects everything and draws it all the way down to the lowest levels. Okay.
If a person there would be no people, then there would be no Hamshacha in this world. There would be Hamshacha in this world, right? But not by a human being. The Dira B'Tachtenim.
There'd be no Dira B'Tachtenim, there'd be only the creation. That's the Hamshacha. God created the world in 6 days. That would be it. Asara Maimodis Nivra Elam, period. And it would stay there. That would be it. The Eibush is Machai the world, and that's it. This is the first time you heard that the Adam is the center of the universe and the one that's Mamala Kavanose.
But Shabbos would be Mikacha V'Kaimo even without Adam.
So what? And weekdays would be created by God and Dvar Hashem. It's also quite nice, Madrega.
Okay, but the purpose is the
This 1 second. This is the first time you heard that the human being is central in fulfilling the Kavanas HaBreira?
Obviously. Not the first time, no.
Of course not. What is Rosh Hashanah? Without a human being, you don't have bchira. You have nothing. I told you have a building without a human being in it. What kind of building is that? Tell me. It's a beautiful structure. That's it. Period. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. Yes, the creation is dependent on you. Why does he say in the Mishnah, Chayav Adam Lemer B'Shvili Nivra Elam? Okay. So now he says like this.
Could I ask a question? I've learned that the Shasad lo mitzvahs lo sasa, that by not doing something, we don't obscure a godly hamshacha that's occurring. It's occurring now, but if we do something, if we don't do it, it comes in. But if we do something, if we don't, what is it? By not doing something, we allow it to come in. It's there. But by doing
there's a Gemara that says hayeshev v'lei over avera is kilo also a mitzvah.
Right. So that would imply that those hamshachas, without a Jew doing an avera, if you don't, I understand if he's not doing a positive avera, he's not bringing down a mamshich from atzmus hakav, etzem hakav. But if a human being wasn't in the world, so to speak, it would seem like those hamshachas that are coming from anyways, that we God forbid block when we do an avera, would be in this world without us anyways. Wouldn't there be a hamshacha?
Absolutely not.
No.
Let's just talk like a ben chamish lemikra, like children. The God gave mitzvahs to the human being, whether to do this or not do that, was only once in history where that happened, by Matan Torah. So without Matan Torah, you get both the mitzvahs, what to do, and also what not to do. There's no human being, God is not giving mitzvahs to this world. It's simple, it's not that complicated. Mm-hmm. That's why Rashi starts, B'Shvil HaTorah, B'Shvil Yisrael. You take away the human being, you have a nice world that is completely like, imagine a beautiful home without human beings in it. It's very tragic, actually, very sad. It's a beautiful building. The concept of a mitzvah means a mitzvah to somebody. Whether you're telling them do this or don't do that, it's both a mitzvah. The mitzvah, ha-mitzvahs, God said, Anecha Hashem Elokecha, lo yilecha lekim acherim. He said, Kabed es avicha, lo yisignev, lo yisirtzach. Both are a mitzvah. Command is a command. If there's no human being, there's no mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are not given to Chai, Semeach, and Doimon. They have no mitzvahs because they have no free choice. They are part of the clockwork of existence, their nature. The sun rises when it has to rise. The moon rises when it has to rise. Everyone's doing exactly what was made. The concept of a mitzvah is only possible with free will. And it's only the human being, and it's only a human being that can exercise to do something and not do something. Like, don't eat from the Eitz Hadas. They did, unfortunately. So there's no concept of mitzvahs if there's no Adam, if there's no human being. There's no purpose of existence without an Adam. That's even more important. That's the whole thing we're learning here, that an Adam is pnimius. Without human being, you have an existence. It would be like building a home and you don't have a child to put into that home. It's like building a home and you have no family that ever lives in that home. How would that be? So it really comes down, it's very simple and about this, nothing very complicated about this.
Second question is, when we spoke last week about Adam de Bria, Adam de Chachma, Adam de Zah, Adam de Malchus, we need specific kavanas to activate those different levels of Adam, or just by doing the mitzvah properly, those different levels of Adam are automatically activated?
That's like asking a question, if a person does a mitzvah without kavana, is the mitzvah doing things? So it comes down to which mitzvah. Some mitzvahs kavana doesn't matter, or it could help. Some mitzvahs are not a mitzvah unless you have kavana. So for example, mitzvah tzedakah, even if you don't have any intention, even if you have a negative intention, the mitzvah is done, so it generates everything it has to generate. It all comes down to what the conditions of the mitzvah are. The fact is, this is what Chassidus talks about when you call it Elov V'Leila Midesov or Lechaven B'Shem. Obviously, as he explains in Tanya later chapters, in chapter Lamet Tes and on, he talks about Kavanas HaMitzvahs. When you bring a Kavana, you're also bringing, obviously the Hamshachah could be more fine-tuned, more specific. That's the second aspect. So in other words, a mitzvah that you may not have to have a kavana, but you do have one, it definitely draws more targeted energy. But it all comes down to different mitzvahs have different, there's different mitzvahs have different roles to play. But bottom line is, every action you do down below, even a child that has no kavana, you're generating a ripple effect through whole seder shtalshlus. Ma'aseh echad, dibur achas, machshava achas, can tip the scales and bring tshuva v'atzola, as the Rambam says. So the fact is, a good deed down below, kavana, not kavana. Obviously, if the mitzvah must have kavana, for example, karbonis or something like that, it's one thing. But generally, every action creates a reaction, cause and effect in all the elements, in all the levels of Adam that we discussed here. Yeah. Okay? So let's continue here. Now he says, V'zehu, now that we've explained what mitzvahs do, the general hamshach of Ratzon Elyon, and the specifics of each specific thing, to your point, tzemer, you put on tzitzis with tzemer, even if you don't know the kavanah sad eshe kamer naki, doesn't mean you're not be mamshech to the lamaila, the tzemer of lamaila. If you know it, it helps, but it doesn't mean that you're not be mamshech. So now he continues, V'zehu, and this is shakol ha-mitzvahs tzrichim liyis b'machshava dibur u'maisa. And this explains the fact that all mitzvahs need to be done in thought, speech, and action. Why? Because shezehu hamshacha b'gimel elam is biyah. Because the whole point of mitzvahs is to draw it down. And machshava dibur u'maisa is bria, yitzira, and asiyah. I think he means even more than that. He probably means that it encompasses, mitzvahs is not a specific detail. Mitzvahs is drawing the whole Elokus into all the levels. So there's a very beautiful sikha from the Rebbe, I'm trying to remember when it is. In later years, Nun Aleph maybe, where he explains about how everything has machshava, dibur, and ma'aseh in it. Even mitzvahs of machshava, let's say a mitzvah like limud HaTorah has dibur, v'debarta bam. Mitzvahs that are maisias have kavana, explains how all mitzvahs have all these three, machshava, dibur, and ma'aseh. Very, very encompassing sikh. I'm trying to remember. It could be even kisisa nun beis. 1 second. Which is literally nun beis, the last kisisa leisata. Let me just see 1 second. I think a Sisa Nun Beis, it could be. No. I don't think so. It's a different Sikha, Machshava Dibra Maisa. No, it's not. I thought it was this Sikha. No, it's a different Sikha. 3 things. Okay, I'll find it. It's a different Sikha. Okay. Baal Zen Nemar. V'shamru derech Hashem laseis doko mishpat. And you shall follow, you should protect, you should preserve the path of God by laseis doko mishpat, to do tzedakah, basically virtue and mishpat and justice. V'hainu. Sham mitzvos, the fact you say derech Hashem, what's derech? What's the diuk derech Hashem? Remember earlier he spoke about the tzneidus, the path. So he's going to explain that derech creates a channel. What is it? V'hainu sham mitzvos hein derech umovei legili shem havaya. The shamru derech Hashem is that mitzvos are a pathway and an entrance way, a movei. It's a, like we say, movei, you say sometimes an introduction, but it means a pathway, an entrance way to the Gili Shem Havaya. That's the diuk. Not just follow God's path. That mitzvahs is the pathway of Havaya. V'yesh b'zeh beis pirushim. And there are 2 meanings in the word Derech Hashem. Ha'echad, Derech liyas hagili b'shem Havaya. It means that there should be the Gili in Shem Havaya. No, it's a path that leads you to Shem Havaya and reveals into Shem Havaya. V'abeis haderech v'hamshocha mishem Havaya. So is it a path into Shem Havaya? In other words, drawing Elokus, mitzvahs into Shem Havaya, or is it drawing from a Shem Havaya further down? The Shneim Emes, page 1187, next page. And both are correct. Both interpretations are true. Sha'idei mitzvahs, through mitzvahs, nasim beizei inyanim. You accomplish both things through mitzvahs. For who? Shenim shemabchinas atzmus sein sof b'shem havaya d'atzilus. Like we learned, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Zah. And you're drawing the atzmus of Ein Sof into the Shem Havaya of Atzilus. V'gam nimshach m'shem havaya d'atzilus b'biyah. And the second thing mitzvahs accomplish, they draw from Atzilus, from the Havaya of Atzilus, into Biyah, into the lower worlds. So when we say V'shamru Derech Havaya, last is Tzedakah Mishpat, that by doing Tzedakah and Mishpat, Shamru Derech Havaya, the Derech into Havaya, the path into Havaya, and the path from Havaya in Atzilus downward into the lower worlds. V'zehu, and this is also, I'm sorry, what's that? V'gam nimshel b'shem havaya d'atzilus b'biyah. Right. V'zehu derech is b'gematria beis pamim havaya Elokim. So derech, which is 224, right? Havaya Elokim is 112. Let's see, Havaya is 26. Elokim is Pei Vav, right? Yeah, 112. Havaya Elokim twice is the gematria of derech. So now he's bringing it back to the pasuk V'yadaita Ayin ki Hashem hu Elokim, Havaya hu Elokim. Remember, the whole thing is yichud of Havaya and Elokim both ways, 2 yichudim. So it's twice Havaya and Elokim is derech, corresponding to do these 2 things. So v'hainu Havaya Elokim b'shamayim imal ba'atzilus v'la'oretz mitochas b'biyah. So basically, the Derech Hashem is referring to the Havaya Elokim in Shamayim imal. What he called before was Das Elyon, I believe, in Atzilus. V'la'oretz mitochas b'biyah, in biyah. Not necessarily Das Elyon, whatever the level is, higher level.
Is he talking about both shiluvim here?
Both what?
Shiluv of Havaya be'adnai and
Yeah. That's the two levels of Havaya Elokim. He
Yeah.
said the two levels of Havaya Elokim. If you look at the beginning of the Maimer here.
But I'm saying that's.
Yes, correct. That's the two levels of Havaya and
Yeah.
Elokim. He said this earlier, yeah. Havaya and
Okay.
Elokim could be, Havaya is united with Elokim or Elokim with Havaya, which is the difference in Shiluv, Havaya, Ba'adnai. Adnai and Elokim are reversible here, are basically interchangeable, because he said Adnai and Elokim are both Malchus. One is Malchus and Atzilus, one is Malchus and Biyah. He said that very clearly.
Right, and I'm saying
So I'm answering for the fourth time. Yes, it includes both Havaya and Elokim in Shiluv Havaya Ba'adnai and Havaya and Elokim as Shiluv Adnai and Havaya. Is that what you're asking?
No, well, in part,
You're
but
not
I'm
asking.
asking
Okay,
the
what
first
are you
part.
asking?
And two pirushim, yesh b'zeh Beis pirushim. The first one, Derech Leos Hagil b'Shem Havaya. So, is this drawing this hamshacha into Havaya? Is that shiluv of Adnai be'Havaya?
Oh,
Yeah,
that I don't
Havaya.
know. That I can't say. I don't know clearly. I don't know. One is bringing it into Havaya, so that could be that you're talking about Havaya and Atzilus. Maybe Havaya Ba'adnai. The second one sounds like Havaya and Adnai. The other one, Adnai and Havaya. Yeah, you could say they correspond. You could say they correspond. Because one is bringing Havaya into Adnai, that would be Havaya into Biyah, the second interpretation. And the first one would be elevating everything into Havaya to higher levels.
Exactly.
Yeah, it could be. It's not exactly, because here we speak Havaya into higher than Havaya. Yeah. You could say that if you yeah. Actually, I would go even further. If you look in the previous, if you look at the top of page 1182 and 1180, before that, he ended up saying there are three levels. That in general there's two, but it breaks into three. The amitis yediyah das elyon is primis sakav and primis la. Yeah. So I would say it's like this. In general, there's two levels. There's Havaya and Adnai and Havaya. But then he spoke about a higher level, that you're connecting even higher than Havaya in the Etzem, where he speaks about the primis atzmus. Yeah. So there for sure it stems with the higher, the first definition, Vishamru Derech Hashem, because you're drawing from Etzem into Havaya. That's the third level that he used earlier. But in general, it's two levels. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
The Ayin Amiti, he called that Yediyah, the Yediyah Amitis, Amitis HaYediyah, the Das Elyon, is this level that he's saying here, correct? Okay. V'zehu bara odam al kula. And this is the meaning of Rabbi Yehuda's words in the Zohar in Vayigash, that this is the meaning that he created the human being above them all, above all, Shaydei Adam, through the human, Adam, or Adam on all levels. Nasa is Chabrus da Atzilus Biyah. Through the human comes the attachment, the connection between Atzilus and Biyah. The Gam Mebchinas Atzmus Ein Sof Shalamaylam Atzilus. So clearly you see the three levels here. And also from Atzmus Ein Sof, that's higher than Atzilus. V'zeu anoichi asisi eretz v'odam aleh barasi. That's the pasuk that Rabbi Yehuda brings as a proof that bara adam al kula, that I created the eretz, the earth, and the human being above it I created. Shaydei adam b'kiyam mitzvos, through the adam, through the performance of mitzvos, shazeu barasi. That's why it says barasi b'gematri taryag. Barasi is the gematria of 613. So it says, Adam Allah Barasi, I created him, in other words, with the power to do 613 mitzvahs. Nasi is chabrus erein sof ima elam. Through that, through the human doing mitzvahs, Barasi becomes the connection between the infinite divine and existence. The ultimate interface that is the theme of Ayin Beis. Okay, that ends this paragraph. Does anybody want to ask anything? So it all comes together. It all comes together. That we in this world bring the connection from the highest, from Atzmus and Sof to Atzilus and Biyah, both Shiluvim, Havaya Ba'adne Adne Ba'avaya, Havaya Elokim, both ways. That's why it's two. Gematria Derech. The paths are two paths. Basically, one is Mamayel Lamata, one is Mamata Lamayel. You bring Havaya into Elokim, you bring Elokim into Havaya, yeah. And then the third level, that all the way to Atzmus, is Nimshach into the Havaya from higher levels. Like he said, the Tefillin draws down into HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All the way from the Etzem, Mechin Atzmim, and all the way from the Etzem. And that explains it. What's still left to explain, but he's going to explain the next paragraph, but we'll stop here. He'll explain, from where does a person merit? Where does the Adam merit to be able to achieve such a great accomplishment? So he's going to explain, where do we get this from? Where do we have this power from? We till now explained that we have the power, but this last piece is going to explain how we have this power. Where do we get it from? Right. And all this is
I have a question, Rabbi.
What's that? All this is still the first interpretation of B'Shemayim Emal V'Aretz Mitachas. Very good. Okay, go ahead.
So we talked earlier in this shiur today about Yichud Kudsha Brichu Shchintei. But also we say for Psikut Zimra Le'echad Hashem Yud Kei B'Vav Kei. What's that Yichud?
Again, which yichud you asked me about? Yud K and Vav K?
Yeah. Yes.
It's another. Listen, in Yechudim you're going to find thousands of levels. It's not just Yud K and Vav K. There's also Havaya and Elokim, Havaya and Adnai. There's Yud K and Vav K. There's also Yud and K and Vav and K. So I mean, I can't go through all of them, obviously, because each one has a different function, a different purpose. Yud K, Vav K is generally Chachma Bina, and Vav K is Zoh and Malchus, when you start breaking it down. He's referred to these different Yechudim earlier. Here he's not, because here the goal is to explain Havaya and Elokim in the Pasuk, in Havaya Hu Elokim, that general principle. When you start breaking it down, they all have many levels. Remember, Elokim and Adnai also are two different levels when you go down to detail. There's also the yichud of Havaya and Kale, and Havaya and Shaddai, and Havaya and Svois, Hashem Svokes, like in the Bas Legani. So it's just different forms of yichudim throughout. Remember, yichud is unification. There's different levels that you unify.
Is there something about tefillah or shevach that causes a yichud between Yud K and Vav K? We say it for Psikut Zimra. The Hashem Yud Kudsha Brichu Shchintei Le'echad Hashem Yud K B'Vav K B'Yechida Shlim B'Shem Kol Yisrael.
Right. So here he explained only Kudsha Brichu V'Shchintei. Didn't go into the rest of it.
Right.
It's not relevant to our discussion here.
I know it's okay. It's not relevant, but I'm asking a question if I can.
There's yichud through of course, every mitzvah, every davening, every learned Torah, everything is full of yichudim. Everything is unifying. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Echad is a central theme in Judaism, is unifying different levels of the divine and unifying Das Tachten, Das Elyon. Over here in Ayin Beis, he's talking now in the broadest sense of the general principles of uniting divine and existence. But when you break it down, if you know the kavanas, every mitzvah, every bracha has its own particular type of yichudim.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Rabbi Jacobson, when we say the Shiur of Havaya Adnai Havaya Elokim, so the
You
difference
don't
is
say Shiur of Havaya and Elokim. You say
No?
Shiur of Havaya and Adnai, or Shiur of Adnai ba'Havaya. You say Yichud of Havaya and Elokim.
I see.
Yeah.
So
If you look on the top of page 1177, he explains this concept, and he says that Adnai and Elokim are one inyan.
Right.
In this context, they're generally one inyan for all practical purposes. He explains it on page 1177, the parentheses there. He says Elokim is the way it's Malchus is still not Silus, and Adnai is the way it comes into Biyah.
So when we say the Yichud of Havaya and Elokim, which seems to be the most operative one for a Jew, when we say like on Yom Kippur, Havaya Hu Elokim, that would appear to remain in Atzilus. Wouldn't it be more apropos, so to speak, to be dealing with the more operative one, which is Havaya, the Shiur of Havaya in Adnai, because we want to bring it down into Biyah rather than remaining in Atzilus.
Havaya Elokim includes also Adnai in this context.
Oh, okay.
So just a question of where you're emphasizing.
Mm-hmm.
Havaya Elokim is the broad sense, because Elokim, Brich is bar Elokim. Generally predominant, you speak Hashem or Elokim, is because you're talking about Hashem that's beyond existence. Elokim relates to existence. In Elokim itself, Elokim is Malchus and Atzilus, and Adnai is how it comes into Biyah. But Elokim and Ashvaya are the two key words. That's why you say every pasuk, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech, every bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad. Another thing you have to remember, Adnai is Havaya, which is the way we pronounce Havaya. There's another aspect to it. So that's another discussion.
I see. Okay, so when we do say Yichud of Havaya Elokim, we are obviously referring to it as Elokim appears in this world, in Olam Asiyah.
Both. Elokim then is the broad sense, is the divine that relates to existence. That's the main thing to focus. That when you break that down, there are many levels, because there's Elokim. Remember, there's also Havaya and Elokim in Bria, and Yetzirah, and Asiyah. So in the broadest sense of the word, in the macrocosm, it's Havaya and Elokim. You start breaking it, it has different manifestations.
It's interesting because Derech, that's gematria of Derech, because in the Kapitel Kuf Yud Tes, there's only 2 letters that are repeated. Of the eight times that each letter is repeated, only 2 have more than 5 times the same word as the first word of the pasuk, and one is Derech, and the other one is Tov. Tov. So it's a good way of bringing it down, the Derech, as the gematria of Hashem Elokim, which I didn't know that. Twice that, right? Derech is 2 times Havaya Elokim, which is this Yichud both ways. Mamal Mata. It's very interesting, I thought.
That's good. That's nice. That's nice.
Derech Tov.
Okay, so we'll stop here at the end of the